Hi, welcome to MINELAB's instructional video on the GP3000. MINELAB are extremely proud of the new technology and features incorporated in this new machine. This video is designed so that you'll get the best use out of these new functions and be able to use them in the field. My name's Doug Stone. I've been chasing gold for over 30 years, including working with the Department of Mines Victoria as a field geologist and editor of publications. I was around when the first detectors were introduced to Australia in the late 70s, early 80s, and had the pleasure of using them out in the field, and I soon realised that the people that succeeded in finding gold were those that really studied and persevered and learnt to use their machine well. Since that time, I've written numerous books and maps for the recreational fossicker to ensure that they get out and find some gold. We've also been running trips in Victoria initially, then to the Northern Territory, Central Australia and Western Australia, taking small groups of New Zealanders and Americans and locals out to really explore Australia's goldfields. This video is an advanced instruction video. Therefore, we presume that you've read MINELAB's GP3000 User's Manual, which is an excellent publication and goes through in detail how the machine works. If you're really thoroughly read this, my instructions combined with this will ensure you're going to find gold. Assuming that you've read the written instruction manual and know how to basically switch it on and go, let's take a very brief look at the basic startup procedure. We'll start by setting all the switches to their normal positions set out in the Quick Start Easy reference on page 28 of the manual. On the front panel, set the All Metal Discrimination switch to All Metal, Soil switch to Normal, Coil switch to Double D, the Balance switch to Fixed, then turn the Level Adjust to 12 o'clock as a starting point. On the back panel, turn Boost to Normal, Signal to Halfway, Tone to Halfway, and Volume to Full Clockwise. Now we can turn the power switch on. Now we adjust the threshold so there is an audible background hum. Correctly setting the threshold is the key to finding small targets or large deep targets. If the threshold level is set too low, small targets will not break over the audible signal line. Setting the threshold level too high will cause small target signals to be lost in the background noise. The most effective setting is where the threshold creates a smooth, gentle hum, and both the large and small targets break the audible line. We now set the tone to suit your hearing. People often hear better in higher or lower tones, especially as we get older. Okay, now we're going to set the tuner on the GP3000. The tuner's designed to cut out any radio interference in the area we're going to work. So you rotate the coil to the point where you get the most interference. Hold it at that point and then down to your tune button, hit it, you'll get a single beep, and then you wait about a minute as it works through its system. There it is. We've got the 3 beeps and the detector's ready to go on and do our ground balancing. The last control to set is the ground balance, and this is one of the most important settings on the detector. As you can see over here, we have very highly mineralised ground with a typical ironstone tea and coffee. Over this side, we have decomposed bedrock. It's very mild looking, but it can be mineralised underneath. What we do, we simply pump the coil above the ground, and as we're doing that, we flick from fixed to tracking. You'll hear a very rapid rapid 5-second change until the signal settles right down. When there's no change in the signal, the detector is balanced and you simply flick it back to fixed and we commence our search. And I recommend that we search in fixed because the last setting is held and any slight variation or tiny target is picked up. You can search in tracking, but the automatic ground counselling will pick up all the little variations in mineralisation, so you have a little bit more background to contend with. It is important to understand that to operate your detector with maximum performance, always try to search in the fixed position. This is going to give you the best depth and sensitivity. You will have to pause and switch back to tracking to rebalance occasionally when you hear the ground changing. However, if the ground is changing a lot and you're having to rebalance every few steps, then remain in tracking, where the detector will automatically compensate for the changes as soon as they occur. Firstly, be aware that if you're searching in tracking and lift the coil off the ground when either stepping over rocks, logs or walking to a new spot, you should always give the detector a few moments to rebalance before continuing your sweep. Best of all, switch into fixed and then back into tracking to re-ground balance the detector. Remember, the detector was still balancing while you had the coil off the ground. Secondly, if you are searching in tracking, always switch into fixed to pinpoint your target. More about that later. We've just covered the basic settings to get you up and running with your new GP3000. Now we're going to go through the advanced techniques so that you can see by changing some of these settings how you will improve the potential of the machine and get your best out of this marvellous piece of technology. The discriminator on the GP3000 can distinguish between the ferrous rubbish and the valuable non-ferrous items. But you've got to be careful because many of our relics are ferrous. So this wonderful little Belgian pistol of the 1880s would have been blanked out and you would have missed it. To operate your detector in the discriminate mode, you must switch the iron discriminate switch from all metal to discriminate. The discriminator works by cutting the signal over ferrous junk and over the non-ferrous valuable items like this gold nugget, the signal is always clear and precise. Signal intensity is very important when accurately discriminating a target. Ferrous rubbish with a weak signal will actually be interpreted as a valuable non-ferrous item. It's only as you get closer to the target and the intensity increases that you'll have the blanking out and the accurate discrimination. Another way to go about it is to scan over the target in several directions. In one direction, you could get the distinct blanking. If that doesn't occur, go around at 90 degrees and try it in the other direction, and you'll get positive discrimination. The level adjust knob has two effects. It controls the ground balance if you're operating in the tracking, and the amount of discrimination if you are searching in the discrimination mode. Let's look at them separately. With the level adjust control set fully anti-clockwise, the discrimination is cautious. Only blanking on ferrous items and any doubtful targets are identified as non-ferrous and valuable. As the control is turned further clockwise, it becomes less cautious and identifies all ferrous objects as ferrous, but occasionally a non-ferrous item may also be blanked out. The danger in using the level adjust in a more clockwise direction is if a small gold nugget is either coated or encased in ironstone. It could be identified as ferrous. Note, If you are searching in the all-metal position, the level adjust is only affecting the ground balance while tracking. The first thing to understand if searching in fixed is that the level adjust control does not affect the ground balance. However, if you are working in tracking, it does. When searching in tracking, the automatic ground balance is readjusting all the time for changes in mineralisation. So that a nugget is not ground balanced out, the GP3000 stops the tracking function each time a target is located. The level adjust control decides which signal is recognised as a target and not simply a mineral change, pausing the tracking mode for one and not the other. With the level adjust control set fully anti-clockwise, the ground balance will be working most efficiently, tracking on soil changes and most hot rocks. As the control is turned further clockwise, it becomes more cautious and pauses on suspect targets. Therefore, in this position, it can be noisier to operate on hot ground. In highly mineralised ground, where there is a lot of mineral variation, the knob should be set to the anti-clockwise position. This will allow the tracking to be most effective for the change in mineral effects and will reduce the amount of false signals. However, very weak targets may be cancelled out, so listen hard for that faint signal and switch immediately to fixed to pinpoint and recover the target. In lightly mineralised ground, you will preferably be searching in fixed, so the level adjust has no effect. But if you're in tracking, the control can be turned towards the clockwise position so that weak target signals are not confused with mineralisation. Let's put these two effects together. It controls the signal strength required to pause the tracking mode. It determines the conductivity level required to identify a target as ferrous or non-ferrous. To look at them together, we could show it in this way. If we have discrimination working while searching in tracking and the level adjust knob in the anti-clockwise position, the ground balance is going to be working at its optimum level. This will suit heavily mineralised ground, but care needs to be taken that faint signals are not cancelled out. In this position, the discriminator is at its most cautious. As the control is turned further clockwise, the ground balance will be paused on more signals and the discriminator will work to a greater depth and identify more targets as being ferrous. We're now going to describe the boost function. With conventional amplifiers, the target's boosted, but the downside, you also bring up all the background noise. With the new technology incorporated in the GP3000, we've been able to reduce the background, and this is carried out by the machine taking a sample every 10 seconds of the ground mineralisation and filtering out the targets as a separate signal. So this setting is very important in working the ground, and there are 3 settings: normal, shallow and deep. With the shallow setting, we're obviously looking for shallow ground, and this is a great example. We have the exposed bedrock and the thin layer of clay and gravel, probably 10 inches thick, that we're looking for those little nuggets that are just tucked in between the bedrock. When working in deep, we boost those very small nuggets very deeply, and also the large nuggets right on the fringes of our detector depth. If you have a look at the stump, this illustrates how erosion has pulled the material, exposing the roots, and shows the depth of material we're dealing here. And what we're interested is detecting this original surface, and we know here that we've got 2 to 3 feet of material to work. But just remember that with the boost function, normal actually switches off any enhancing mode. The soil setting's easy to understand. The 3 settings, sensitive, normal and salt, allow us to work these separate environments. In normal, we're looking at average mineralisation, average depth and size of target, and that's what we'll be using most of the time. Sensitive is used where we know that we've got shallow gravels and we want to pick up those little nuggets. Sensitive's also very good in highly mineralised conditions. We lose a bit of depth, but we help even out the mineralisation and amplify those small targets. And we've all worked in salty areas down next to salt lakes, and you find that it's more and more difficult to ground balance your detector. Once you flick into salt, the detector evens out. We know that we can do the fringes, but we can even walk out on the salt areas that were almost impossible to work in the past. If you listen to the target signal from a GP3000, it is normally a two-tone signal. Depending on the size and depth of the target, it will often start high, then drop to a low pitch. The amount of variance in the signal can be controlled with the signal control. If you like a relatively even tone, the knob should be kept at the anti-clockwise position. If you like a big tone variance, then turn the knob more clockwise. However, be aware that in highly mineralised ground, where you are getting constant ground noises, turning the knob clockwise will increase threshold instability, so a lower setting is preferred. The GP3000 has the ability to change the search pattern of its coils just by flicking a switch. To start with, let's look at how the standard double D coil works. The standard double D coil has two independent windings. The left-hand winding transmits the electromagnetic field and the right-hand winding receives. The search pattern of a standard double D will look like this. A straight blade running through the centre of the coil from toe to heel and down into the ground. The advantages of the double D search pattern are very thorough ground coverage and easy pinpointing. When the coil switch is in the mono position, the left-hand winding transmits, but then switches to momentarily receive, in phase with the right-hand winding. This creates a pseudo-mono loop pattern, which gives better sensitivity but a more cone-shaped pattern. The pinpoint position is now tilted to the left-hand side of the coil. The third configuration of the coil switch is cancel. This works similar to mono, but takes the two windings out of phase so that the detector's computer can subtract its signal from the right-hand winding. The effect of this is to cut out outside interference, which is too great for the tuning control. Cancel mode does cause a noticeable reduction in depth, but often will allow you to detect areas under power lines or close to interference that you normally wouldn't be able to search. It should also be noted that the coil switch is made to work in combination with MINELAB specially wound double D coils. Other coils may not give the same results. Remember, your search technique is just as important as mastering your new GP3000. It's a nice even swing, keeping the coil parallel to the ground. It's just backwards and forwards, and your forward motion, you can see the samples of quartz, back over with the leading edge of the coil, then the centre and the back. And if you're achieving that sort of forward motion, that's perfect. And when you're working around obstacles as tree stumps or shrubbery, just remember which coil you're using. I've got a double D on, and if I come into the side of that butt of the tree stump, I'm not actually going to detect right up against the stump. However, if I use the leading edge, which is very, very sensitive with a double D, I'll cover all the ground around that obstacle. We continue the search, and I'm just concentrating for that faint target. But remember, keep the coil on the ground. That's something. You've got to try and get in there. The first thing you do, I've got a distinct signal. I've gone in. It's persisting in both directions. First thing I do is just simply clear a pad, probably 12 inches square, and back over the target. It's persisting, so I've definitely got a target in the ground. If I'd swept over with my foot and got a bit of surface trash, it'd be kicked well away. But we know we've got a target. First thing you do, put your detector out of the swing range of your digger, and we just use the broad edge of the digger and simply scrape the surface soil off. Then I repeat the procedure. I've got the target in that direction, it's still there. Just draw an imaginary line. I'm going through the pinpointing process, coming back in at 90 degrees with the leading edge. I'm picking up the signal, another cross, and I know that the target is just below us here. So what I do now is, now that we've got a definite, I can be a little bit more vigorous with my digging and make sure that you work around the edge of the signal. Don't go building away at the middle of the signal, because whatever it is, you may damage it. Back over the hole, it's still there. I'll simply scoop that out. We're in hard, compacted ground here, and the ground looks good. It's nice and rubbly. And again, over the target. Do you notice the signal's getting more intense? It's getting louder, so we're getting down closer. I move around again and repeat the procedure. You pick out of range. That sounds good. Now the whole idea is have a sloped edge hole until you're sure it's a target. It's still in the hole. Gee, this is tight gravel. Again, I'm working around the edge of the hole. Careful not to get the blade of the pick right in the centre. Pulling out. Repeat the procedure. It's no longer in the hole, so we've got the target out. What we do then, get back into the detecting position, get the digger out of range, and quietly come in over your spoils heap. And see, I've just picked up the signal with my leading edge. All I do then, with the coil away, is just simply pick up. The target's still there. This takes a bit of doing actually, but just continue. Nice as intense. I've got the target. Now simply kneel down, flatten your coil out, and I half hand it. I've got the little object. Nothing in that one. And then the final, I just dribble down. And then I just draw a little imaginary line. And that's what we're looking for. And it's the colour we want too. A beautiful little nugget, and that's what makes this hobby so exciting. Just remember though, we've got to fill our holes in. We want to leave the bush as we found it. Well, that concludes MINELAB's instructional video, and I'm sure if you follow our tips, read the user's manual, and really spend time familiarising yourself with your machine, you'll be soon out there finding gold, like the little bit we turned up. And I certainly look forward to meeting you on the goldfield shortly.
To look at these or any of the other high-quality MINELAB detectors, we encourage you to visit our website at www.minelab.com or www.minelab.com.au.